Kid of Arcadia, Chapter 4. When the Guy Woke Up. The summer was half gone by the time Dad was standing at the door. I snuck glances at him and Mom from the den when they greeted, and examined his every move like he was the first real man I'd ever seen up close. Curiosity brought me to him, but fear kept me at a distance, as if I was staring down some big Serengeti cat. All he did was shake my hand in the threshold, as shy as ever, and then catch me in a few eye-to-eye crossfires from around the corners the rest of the day. He'd look my way and wink, and I'd be off back to my place on the floor before the television in a flat second, making like it never happened. As the days passed and the boxes piled, I felt more and more suffocated until I couldn't stand the cramped basement any longer, boiling in the August heat and coughing up the newly discovered dust. I'd gone from having all the time in the world to having none. Mom had put her notice in at her job, and all three of us were rushing around for the move. Dad didn't have the nerve to stay there, to my relief, and shacked up in some hotel, so every day he'd run off to his little hideaway in the afternoon and make it feel like he wasn't coming back. More than once she asked me about what had happened to Broder and why I couldn't just go over there. But the courage I needed to put it into words took a long time to work up. "Why do you need an ambulance?" she asked. "Because he hit his head on the cement, and he was bleeding and was kinda out of it." "Wow, a concussion? Why'd he do that?" "Beats me." She shook her head. "I heard he's blonde now, too. I guess teens do crazy things they regret." I knew she was talking about having me. I didn't tell her what he had told me, just figuring that for a smart guy who spent all his days on his hobbies in his room, it was a long stretch for her to say that he was like her. A few times when she sensed my boredom and frustration at packing, she pressured me to go over and find out what his story was, but the more rumors I heard, the happier I was to remain in the dark about it. But the feelings were there. I just wanted to know he was going to be good before I left. Every morning I hugged my pillow and felt for him in the shower, and as all that streaming water poured out my hair, washing into my eyes and over my short shoulders, it was all I could do to keep from holding myself. A strange feeling flooded me whenever I thought of Broder then, like a fidget in the fingers, a quaking in the stomach, and a tangy tinfoil taste on my tongue. He was the first and last person I wanted to see, even when Dad was a room away. Those next few days were clouded over with the kind of misty haze that dimmed the sky, and the afternoons were like the last 10 minutes of school. Putting behind me what I saw happening to Broder took a week to do, and every afternoon I'd lie cozy on my floor mattress and toss my baseball at the ceiling to gun down the minutes, because I didn't have my basketball. Unlike the days, the afternoons were full of moments like that, and few distractions. Long after the dread of moving away had faded and the big day of getting to see Dad fell flat, just the thought of leaving Broder half dead still made me uneasy. In my final days there, I'd turn my head up to the next-door garden outside my ground-level window and then off to the nuclear dark of the A-bomb clouds rolling up. I used to pretend the clouds were Soviet nukes landing. August 4, 1981. I was stepping on some plants in a garden, and Mom called me, but when I went inside, I was in Broder's room, and Dad was in Broder's bed, and Broder had these horns in his hair, and was pointing at the ceiling with one hand. I played his games for a while, then I was sitting in his lap, and he was holding my head down with his other hand like he was trying to climb on top. I liked being there. When my first real confrontation with Dad happened that summer, I was chest down on the den rug, caught up in a Magnum PI. I remember that day well. He tapped his foot on my denim-clad ass, and I looked up to see him towering over me. "So, bud, how's the old pecker doing?" he asked, trying to joke with me, only because Mom wasn't around. He was just turning 30 then, still looking and sounding younger than he was. His shoulders were narrow, his face unshaven, his body bony, and his voice slurred. He looked like an older me. "It's fine," I shrugged. He always asked me that question. "I swear you are the thinnest kid I've ever seen. Is she feeding you?" he asked. "You hungry?" "She feeds me every day," I grunted. "Not enough," he mumbled. "Look, I'm sorry I gotta burst your bubble, bud, with all this, but someone has to, right?" He joked like he did over the phone, like he'd rehearsed every sentence in the mirror that morning or something. So just being in the room with him felt like sharing the air with some random dude just smack down talking. He didn't know anything, and it didn't even faze him. He just hung silent in the static background as the television held my eyes, and even in the midst of those 100 hazy commercials while I waited for him to panic and back off like Mom would have done by then. But he didn't. He didn't know me like she did. "Gag me with a spoon," I said, fiddling with the rug. "Okay, little dude, I think you gotta turn that boob tube off and lose that shit you're doing. I've been good about giving you breathing room, and now you're really starting to blow it, man." I turned to face him. "Sorry." "You don't have to be sorry about it or anything, man. I'm just telling you to get your shit together because I know you don't want me doing it, and I don't want to do it either." "Later," I said, turning back to the screen. "It ain't about later, bud. It's about you making a scene," he said, biting at the end of his sleeve on and off like a small child. "Look, I totally know it's been a while since I called, and even longer since she's cared a damn about taking you over to see me, but how about this, bud? You give me a break and I'll give you one, okay? I don't know what she's told you, but seriously, man, I didn't come back to mess up your shit." "Sure," I said, turning back to the TV. "Are you mad?" "No," I replied. "Well, fuck, man. Kids are supposed to be mad at their parents. Didn't you know that?" he asked. "No, that goes away after a while." "What about now?" "Now it's just kind of, I don't care," I said, feeling like giving him the break he was asking for right there. It was an underwear ad for women, and there were close-ups. "Yeah, shit happens, I guess," he said, and leaned against the blank wall. "You still got that basketball? We could go shoot it around one of these days, if you're still into that. I know you like basketball, and I got a great turnaround jump shot you gotta see." He trailed off, and then rebounded. "You still have that thing, right, bud?" He always called me his bud, probably something he picked up from all the buds he smoked. "Yeah, I got it," I answered, remembering that it was still at Broder's where I'd left it. I didn't want to tell him that I played with that ball almost every day and even slept with it. "So you're going to be meeting your little brother soon. He's 6, looks just like you, but with glasses," he said, clasping his fingers around his eyes like glasses. A wave of disgust boiled out of my blood and burned on my skin, and I knew I just had to get out of that room fast. No way was I going to meet this stupid fling half-brother of mine. Fuck that kid, I thought, so I flipped him off. "Hey, that's a nice one. She's teaching you. But I already got one of those, sorry." "Hey, Eliot, say you and me, oh shit, yeah," he said, rubbing his eyes so he'd not have to face me when telling me to do something. He was just like Mom. I stood and pushed past him in the threshold, as nothing had disgusted me more than his one big mistake. "My name's Jared," I mumbled. I marched across the kitchen. My limbs shook and knees buckled. I gulped and heaved as I pounded from the side door and plodded down the concrete walk. It hadn't been the first time he'd done it, but now I knew for sure he wasn't going to get me mixed up with his other kid again. At first I didn't know where to go, so I just kept pacing, dreading that he'd be following me when he wasn't. I slid down the narrow path between the house and the chain-link fence to make sure he couldn't follow me, him being too big to fit, and then continued on to the front yard where I grabbed my skateboard off the lawn and threw it down on the pavement. I rode it over the drop and sped across the scorching vacant one-way drag with it. The hot wind blew through my hair out there as I pumped that board that coasted up the sidewalk on the other side, making me feel like I had just left that place for another planet, like I was seeing everything for the last time. But what a rush it was, with the hot summer sun all over me and the sensation of so perfect an escape. The next house after the junction was Broder's, and since I'd last seen him I had tried to blow him off and forget him once he hit the ground, like a dandelion spore, but now I really wanted my ball back. And also, yeah, I figured the unanswered questions about him had been bugging me long enough, and I knew I only had so many chances left. Now that I was on my own for the first time in days, it seemed like maybe the last time I'd get to see him, so I bit my lip and turned up his driveway. I just needed to hide out from Dad. When I reached the front steps at his place, I stomped on the board's back and pushed it to the grass near the front porch. And the second his mom saw me at the screen door, I felt the smoke screen lift. The plastic door snapped shut behind me. "I was hoping you'd come by," his mom said. "Maybe you'll have better luck than his father and I have lately. You're the only one he talks to anymore," she said, staring into space across the street somewhere, strangely distant. "Is he okay?" I asked. "We don't know. They said they saw something in his head scans, but they don't know what it is yet. It's right at the front of his head. Could be serious, they said, whatever it is. They said it could be why he's not been himself, and the constant migraines, too. His medicine hasn't worked in weeks, but we may have caught it in time. The appointments are already made." "I made all the appointments right there," she said, leaning on the wall. "Don't talk about it with him." I just nodded slowly, too puzzled to ask what all that was and what any of it meant for him, but I knew it wasn't good. Everything I needed to know came across in her eyes, the same low and drooping eyes Mom had every night after a visit from the social worker, and by that alone I knew it wasn't good. She led me into the living room, where he was lying on the burlap couch, just watching TV. His head was still bandaged, his hair still blonde, and his face low and formless, a far cry from the giddy, twitchy performance last time. He seemed startled when he saw me and sat up, but then ignored me. For some reason he wasn't wearing his charm bracelet anymore. We sat watching a bit of Chips together without a word, and I could tell he was nervy to see me. He didn't seem to have it in him to break the silence, and there was nothing I really wanted to say to him if he didn't say something first. Before us lay some photos sprawled out on the coffee table, pictures of like when he was 5 or 6, with school shots and other candid clips as well. He never smiled at any of his old pictures either. In fact, a passing glance between that brooding portrait of a brown-haired him and this blonde guy looking banged up and put off on the couch next to me made me wonder why he had to be that way all the time now, and why he only ever seemed happy when he was high. I had no idea just how ill he was, and figured it was something that would pass, something you get sick from for a while and get over like anything else. Then he stood and walked out to climb the stairs in the hall, leaving the TV on like he didn't want me to follow, but I scurried up behind him. Immediately I remembered the air and how stiff and humid it was the last time, like it would tear my lungs apart. I remembered him sitting in that room like he was nothing, like a piece of furniture or a dead beetle in an anthill being eaten by ants. He limped down the small hallway at the top of the narrow stairwell with the drag of a wounded insect, and I cautiously followed after him to his loft. "Broder?" I asked. He threw himself down in his swivel chair and dropped his head on his desk to bang it slightly over and over for a minute like he was trying to cause another concussion, and then straightened up. He glanced around at the floor. The room looked the same as it did the day of the jump. Clothes were strewn everywhere, the bed was unmade, school books were open on the desk alongside the wires, switches, cords, and video game stacks collecting dust. The same beam of light poured down from a tear in the curtains like a laser in the sweaty air. Even my basketball still rested on the floor where I'd tossed it weeks prior. He slumped his shoulders over the rim of the chair and bent his head back in embarrassment. His dyed hair was shaved below the bandages, already coming in brown again at the base. "What, you're supposed to be my kid brother or something now?" he asked suddenly, rolling his eyes. "What? Who are you?" He raised one of his still brown eyebrows. "Huh?" I asked. "I know you, but I don't know who the fuck you are." That news hit me like a rank shift of wind. How could he not remember me, I wondered. Could he still be having memory problems? I was going to assure him that I wasn't his kid brother, but then I got this notion that perhaps he could still be a big one for me. And who else did I really have in my life back then anyways? As far as I knew, it might have been the last time I'd ever see him, so I went for it, even if it was terrible. "Yes," I said, waiting to see how he'd react. He cocked one of his eyebrows for a moment and squinted his eyes, but then shook his head. "Seriously, I'm asking." "I'm your half-brother, a fling kid your dad had," I said. "You mean we're half-related?" "Yeah, that's right," I gulped. "How come I haven't seen you?" He rose from his chair and stepped over to stand beside me. "We've been busy. We're moving away soon, and I may never see you again," I said, feeling that same anxiety creep up again that I'd been feeling all week because of the move. "Why'd he do it? Why'd I let him do it?" he whispered, and turned his face away, moving his hand up to rub my shoulder and then up to itch at his bandage. "What?" I asked. I bent away from him for a moment and thought maybe I'd feel better if I sat down. I was shaking all over with anticipation to tell him more about our life together and all the things we'd done from all the fantasies of him I'd ever had, but I resisted the temptation. To calm my trembling so he wouldn't catch me doing it, I sat on his bed instead and grabbed a nearby baseball and glove, flopped down and began tossing it at a ceiling, catching it with every short pitch. To my surprise, he sat down on the red bed beside me and placed his steady hand on my glove arm, interrupting my throw. The ball hit the sheet. "You're shaking," he whispered. "What?" I asked, retracting my arm. "Relax." He lowered his head down on my shoulder and tucked his face into the pillow near my neck. Then he ran his hand across my chest and slung his other arm around the back of my head like he was trying to cozy up next to me, but I wriggled away. "Dude, I stumbled on words. He straightened his body in the bed so that he was lying beside me, which felt strange because he'd never done that before. Then he pushed one knee down between my legs to separate them on the bed and walked his fingers down my chest like a spider. That made me think of every show where people did things like that and what it usually meant. We looked into each other's eyes, paused silent and still, and an inner demon stirred up my throat, both resisting and craving whatever was happening. He lifted his shoulder and head off the pillow, withdrew his arm from around back, and supported his head on his palm as he gripped down on my zipper spot with the other. As much as it felt weird, just his touching there was enough to put my tremor to rest. But he pushed his hand farther down my jeans and pressed his fingers tight into that region, smirking nastily, biting his lip, and I gulped again. "I'm a mockman now," he whispered in my ear. I could read his eyes as plainly as he could probably read mine, calm and deceitful, alien-like. Part of me just wanted him to reach down there and relieve the tension he was making, and the other part just wanted to hoof it. It was one thing if I was the one doing it, but it was something very different if he was going to be doing it to me, and right in his own house. He stopped and squinted into my eyes until I could see the pomp in my own reflecting off his. That's how close we were. Now it was too weird. I had to get out of there. I gotta go," I said, backing off. In my confusion, I hopped over him and off the bed, threw his glove to the floor, and probably stumbled a few times just trying to find where the floor was as I staggered away. He must have had some wrong idea about what I wanted or something, and I couldn't form the words to explain what it was. No part of me wanted him thinking I was into him or whatever he thought it meant, if he was even thinking that, that is. I had no clue at the time if it was even him or me doing it. "Don't." He spun around, sitting straight up. I guess I have to pack stuff. See you later," I said. I grabbed my basketball off the floor and cleared the room, my blood running amok to turn all my limbs to stone. Everything seemed to go in slow-mo as I left him there. The world turned upside down even. No way. That was just a guy thing, right? What guys do, I assured myself as I paced down the stairs. It was a joke. Good one, I thought. It was an accident that made me stiff. That happens on its own, I thought. I hoped no one would see me go. "Howdy do," his mother asked, causing me to jump as I reached for the front screen door. I blushed and turned away from her, trying to hide the stiff spot in my jeans. "Everything is fine. Yeah, I'm going home now. Bye," I said, and pushed quickly across the foyer. Snapping the screen door open, I stepped back out into the heat and brightness. The shame of lying and leaving so suddenly crippled what little part of me wasn't queasy at the thought of him. What a strange world that guy was living in after his fall. He certainly wasn't himself anymore, and I wondered if he even knew what he was doing in that dark little hole of his. It was just too creepy now. I jumped on my skateboard, closed my eyes, and stepped into a burst of light outside that now took a while getting used to. At least I had Dad's ball back, though. The next day, Mom and Dad made a run to the new house, which was really Dad's old childhood home he inherited, and they dragged me along for a peek at it. The passing landscape from the back seat nauseated me throughout the trip, with the highway's back fence graffiti and countless other side streets flying by every second. If the writing all over my anxious face was as encrypted as the graffiti, I could have passed out from the heat back there and they wouldn't have noticed. They were more interested in tearing off the old scabs between them. Leave him alone. He always goes to Broder's house, Mom protested from the passenger side. Yeah, I know all about it. I just don't think he should be able to walk out like that whenever, Dad said. His opinions about me began clashing with Mom's the minute he walked in the door that summer. But at least now he had opinions. Oh, relax. That place isn't Buffalo. There are no bad people there. Broder's just down the street. He's over there all the time and he never gets into any big trouble, Mom said. He'll just have to change his ways, Dad replied. It's different in the city. And if you ask me, that Broder guy isn't anyone he should be hanging around with. What'd he do, jump out a window? I thought we were over the whole he could fly stuff. Nobody asked you, I told him. Hey, you gotta grow up now, man. Mother Nature's son back there, child of nature, Dad said, trying to mock Mom. And I guess you must know so much about self-control, she mumbled to him. He did his best to ignore stuff like that from her as long as he had 2 pictures of 2 different black-haired boys in his wallet. Like her, he also knew shame. Everywhere I looked in that hour of traveling, I saw another city, another neighborhood off the highway like the one I'd grown up in, like the world never ran out of them. The image from the rear window of a stuffy car riding down the highway is like a TV broadcasting only one show and repeat, and I wonder what all those other kids and all those other hoods were all up to with their own no-man's lands and lapses to hang out in, and if any of them felt like I did. My thoughts were elsewhere to the extent of the trip. That morning in Broder's loft the day before never left me. How could it? In all the years I'd known him, I'd never had a problem going into it with myself. But that was just fun and games, kid stuff, and all he'd do then was watch. Upon arrival at the new house, I saw what was going to be my new room and the 4 blank white walls and window on the 2nd floor I was going to have to get used to from then on. I saw a different view facing the backyard I'd have to rise to every morning. None of it mattered to me. I was just glad the move wasn't whizzing by like I thought it would. You saw your room? Did you like it? Come on, you should be glad we did this. Just like we left it, don't you think? Look at this backyard, kiddo, huh? Don't give me that. This has been a long time coming, was all I heard from either of them that afternoon. Everywhere I went in that house, my footsteps echoed into space. It was that hollow in there. They soon realized their words were falling to a black hole somewhere in my ears, and they left me alone most of the day in the empty upstairs bedroom. I felt like I was pulling one over on the 2 of them, like I was getting away with thoughts they'd never approve of, and then I got a little too used to it. They soon gave up on me as usual, so I gave up on them. I knew Broder had probably long figured out I wasn't his brother by then, but it didn't bother me. Even with the hot tedium all around, I still shivered at the thought of us hanging out, maybe playing basketball with the ball Dad had given me, this time in the sweltering driveway with our shirts thrown to the side. It wasn't a feeling like the bathing suit girls on TV getting me off, or the thought of them naked behind the static. It wasn't fantasy, it was real life now, and as I sat in the different house I longed to be back with him in his loft, but every time I was there, all I wanted to do was run.